Welcome, listener. Ready to explore a world where the line between myth and reality gets a little fuzzy? We're about to dive into the realm of brownies, those helpful but sometimes mischievous household spirits.
You might think you know them, tiny guys who do chores and vanish if you're too kind. Right.
Yeah, that's the image that usually comes to mind.
Well, get ready for some surprises. We're going to uncover their origins, the traditions surrounding them, and you'll see just how much variety there is in the world of household spirits.
So where do we even begin with these elusive creatures? Where do they first pop up in our stories and folklore?
You got to go way back, further than you might think. It's amazing, actually, how much they have in common with the Roman Laras.
The Laras, those were like the guardian spirits of Roman households, right?
Exactly. Both solitary figures devoted to service, often shown with a healthy amount of body hair, let's say. And both, of course, expect a little something in return for their efforts.
So we're talking offerings of cream, porridge, maybe a sweet treat left by the hearth.
You got it. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement, for sure. But there's a key difference that makes brownies even more interesting.
Oh, what's that?
Unlike the Lars, who were pretty much stuck with the house, brownies are known to walk out if they aren't happy.
That's a pretty bold move for a household spirit. Sounds like they've got a strong sense of self-worth.
Absolutely. It suggests a personality, a touch of maybe drama. They're not just blindly following orders, they've got expectations. Which makes you wonder, what kind of work were they actually doing around the house?
Yeah, it's got to be more than just dusting and sweeping, right?
Oh, way more. Think housework, helping with farm tasks, even ensuring the overall prosperity of the household, all while everyone else is sleeping.
And that's what I call a dream come true. Especially back in the day, when people didn't have all the conveniences we have now. Having a little extra help around the house, even if it's unseen, must have been a huge relief.
It was a real partnership. Humans got help, and in return, brownies got offerings and respect. A delicate balance, but one that seems to have worked for centuries. But let's be honest, no matter how helpful they are, brownies aren't exactly known for being, well, good looking.
They're usually described as not so easy on the eyes.
It's true. Ugly, brown-skinned, hairy, it's the standard description. Kind of a funny contrast to their helpful nature. You'd think a magical being would be a little more aesthetically pleasing.
You'd think. And it's interesting how their size seems to have changed over time. In the older stories, they're often human-sized or even larger.
Right. That's not the little gnome-like image we usually have in mind.
Not at all. It's like, over time, they've shrunk in the popular imagination. But some things have stayed constant, like that brown hair and, well, their lack of fashion sense.
Which brings us to the most famous brownie rule: give them clothes and poof, they're gone.
That's a puzzle, isn't it? Why would a simple act of kindness, offering them some clothes, be the one thing that drives them away?
Some folks say it's insulting, like you're saying they're not presentable enough without proper clothes. Others say it's a sign of respect, elevating them to a status they don't want. Almost like we're trying to impose our human values on a being from a completely different world.
And they're not just quietly slipping away either. They make sure you know why they're leaving.
Oh, absolutely. Those famous parting words like, red breeks and a ruffled sark, you'll no get me to do your work, really makes a statement.
It really does, like a reminder that this is a partnership with rules, and if you break them, well, you're on your own. But it still makes you wonder, why would anyone risk it? If you know giving them clothes is a no-no, why even tempt fate?
It's human nature, maybe. The urge to help, to express gratitude in a way that makes sense to us. Maybe some people thought they were actually doing the brownie a favor.
Or maybe it was a mix of good intentions and just plain curiosity. But losing your magical helper and your household's prosperity just to test a theory, that's a pretty big gamble.
It does make you think about how we view the supernatural. Just because something seems kind to us doesn't mean a brownie will see it that way. But we've been talking about brownies in general, but there are all sorts of regional variations out there.
Like a whole extended family of brownie relatives.
Exactly. And each one has its own personality and quirks. It's amazing how these beliefs have evolved over time, adapting to different regions and cultures. Shows the power of storytelling, doesn't it?
So let's take a tour of these regional variations. First up, Wales, home of the bubach.
The brewbach. They're helpful, just like their brownie cousins. But they're known for being a bit temperamental, like a brownie with a fiery Welsh spirit. They'll let you know if they're not happy.
That sounds like someone you don't want to mess with. A grumpy brownie with a tendency for chaos could make life pretty unpredictable.
There's even a story about one bubak who got banished to the Red Sea for his antics. That's a long way to go for causing a little trouble.
From household mischief to international exile. It seems even helpful spirits have their limits.
Okay, so we've met the bubak of Wales. Helpful, but with a bit of a temper. Now let's hop over to the Isle of Man, where we find the Fenadary. What are they like?
The Fenadary are a bit of a mixed bag. They're strong and willing to help, but they're not always the brightest bunch. There's a story about one mistaking a hare for a sheep.
So, strong, but not always the sharpest tool in the shed. Makes you wonder if their help is always intentional, or if sometimes they just stumble into doing the right thing.
A bit of both, maybe. It makes their stories pretty funny, though, and it reminds us that not every supernatural being is all-knowing or perfect, even in folklore.
As long as the work gets done, right? A little laughter along the way doesn't hurt. Okay, next stop, Northern England, where we meet the Hobbs. Hobbs are a lot like brownies, actually. They're often connected to the hearth, that central part of the home, and they're known for their mischievous side. But Hobbs also like specific places, like caves or hidden spots and inns. They appreciate a good hideout, it seems.
So they're brownies with a bit more personality. Maybe a taste for the finer things, a comfy spot by the fire, and a good prank to liven things up.
That's a good way to put it. They like their comfort and their fun, but they're still helpful to those who treat them right.
Yeah.
Okay, now for a twist on the usual brownie story, let's talk about the Silky.
The Silky. What's so different about her?
Well, for one, she's one of the few female spirits in this whole world of folklore, and she's always depicted in gray silk, hence the name, known for her kindness and helpfulness. So, a brownie in a silk dress, it's definitely a different image.
It is. Makes you wonder if that whole give them clothes and they disappear rule applies to her. Maybe the rules are different for spirits with a bit more fashion sense.
That's a good point. The stories don't mention any Silkies vanishing because of clothes. Maybe she's figured out how to balance her magical nature with a little bit of style, but there is a bit of a darker side to her story, though.
Uh-oh. What kind of dark side?
Well, there's a tale about a Silky who turned into a poltergeist, wreaking havoc in the house. It's a reminder that even kind spirits can have a darker side.
So even silk dresses and good intentions can't always stop a spirit from turning mischievous or even mean. I guess it reinforces the idea that these beings, no matter how helpful or playful they seem, deserve our respect. Can't always predict what they'll do.
Exactly. We can't just assume we understand them or their motivations. They operate by a different set of rules.
And speaking of different rules, our last stop takes us to the Scottish Highlands, home of the Arisk. These guys sound different from all the others we've talked about.
You're right. The Rowries is less of a homebody, more of a wild spirit. They're often described as half man, half goat, hanging out in streams and waterfalls. Not exactly the type you'd expect to find doing housework.
So instead of dusting and sweeping, they're more likely to be frolicking in the wilderness.
That's a better picture. They're wild at heart, strong and agile. But here's the interesting part. If you can tame them, they become super loyal servants. There are even stories of them working for wealthy families.
Now that's an image. A half goat, half man serving tea? That's a story you don't hear every day.
It really shows the variety of these brownie-like creatures. From household helpers to wild beings, they all have their place in folklore.
So we've got the hard workers, the pranksters, the stylish ones, the untamed ones. It's like a big family reunion of brownie relatives, each with their own story. But what connects them all? What's the common thread running through these different tales?
I think it's that ancient human fascination with the unseen world. They represent our hopes, our anxieties about the unknown, and our belief in the power of magic. Whether they're tidying up the house or running wild in the hills, they remind us there's more to the world than meets the eye. They tap into that feeling, that we're not alone, that there might be other beings out there watching, maybe even influencing our lives in ways we don't understand.
And no matter what they look like or how they act, they all seem to follow that one big rule: no clothes. Like it's some kind of universal law for dealing with household spirits. You break it, you face the consequences.
It is strange, isn't it? Like clothing is some kind of barrier between the human world and theirs. Maybe it's about keeping a distance, a reminder that they belong to a different realm.
Don't try to tame the wildness. That mystery is part of what makes them so interesting.
Yeah. Trying to dress them up is like forcing them to fit into our world, our rules, and that's where they draw the line.
It's really amazing how much variety there is in brownie lore. It's not just one simple story, it's a whole tapestry of different traditions and beliefs.
That's what makes folklore so cool. It shows how creative people are and how our stories change over time. It's not fixed, it's always evolving.
Why do you think we're still so fascinated by brownies? I mean, even centuries after these stories first appeared, they still capture our imaginations.
Maybe it's a longing for a simpler time when people felt more connected to nature, to the unseen forces around them.
Like we miss that sense of wonder and magic, which can be hard to find in our modern world.
Exactly. And brownies, with their mix of helpfulness and mischief, they represent that duality perfectly. They're relatable, even though they're strange. They remind us that even everyday things can have a little magic, if we're open to it.
I wouldn't mind having a brownie of my own, taking care of chores while I sleep, leaving a little sparkle behind.
Right. Imagine waking up to a spotless house and a fresh pie, all thanks to your brownie, buddy.
Tempting. But even without a magical helper, maybe we can all embrace that brownie spirit. Working hard, helping others, and maybe causing a little harmless trouble now and then.
I love that. It's about finding balance, responsibility, and joy, the practical and the magical. And who knows, maybe if we cultivate that brownie spirit in ourselves, we'll attract a little magic into our own lives.
So as we wrap up our look at brownies, I want to leave our listeners with this. What if, instead of looking for brownies out there, we become the brownies in our own lives? The helpers, the mischief makers, bringing good fortune to everyone around us.
That's a beautiful thought, embracing the best of the brownie spirit. It reminds us that the power of these stories isn't just in the stories themselves, but in how they inspire us to live better lives.
And that's what makes exploring these topics so rewarding. It's not just about learning facts, it's about understanding ourselves and our place in the world, seeing the seen and the unseen.
Connecting to those ancient beliefs, the themes that resonate across cultures and time, and maybe rediscovering a bit of magic along the way.
Well said. This brings us to the end of our brownie adventure.
We hope you've enjoyed this glimpse into their world.
And remember, next time you hear a strange noise at night or find a chore mysteriously done, it just might be a brownie working their magic.